Godzilla! What up, everyone? DJ Newis here with you on the Metal Time Radio podcast with my good friend Kevin Lambert from the Entertainment Headquarters. Thank you, sir, for joining me for this little adventure.
Pleasure as always.
The last time that we did something like this was, like, believe it or not, 10 months ago. So almost a year ago that we did that live event for like 6 or 7 hours where we all, like, between you, me, Jedi, and Sci-Fi Central, we went on a countdown. Our top, our rankings of the Godzilla films, the live-action Godzilla films. We didn't bother with anything else, which is the same here. I'm not going to worry about the animation stuff or anything like that. And, of course, it doesn't include Empire, which isn't out quite yet. So once that happens, I'll probably be doing another one of these from a year from now.
Yeah, maybe another live.
Right. That'd be fun, you know. Just have to prepare a little bit more. Might have to have our dinner sitting aside and a lot of alcohol.
Yeah.
100%. Also, for those that don't know, coming up soon, Kevin would have the date. We're going to be doing a discussion review on Monarch, the series, with NECA will be with us as well.
Well, we've got a few things coming up, you and I.
Yeah.
On this channel as well, the Metal Tavern Radio. On the 14th, we're doing our next episode of the Cinematic Synergy, which I believe is Studio 666, which is obviously the Foo Fighters film. And that is obviously one thing I'm very much looking forward to, because I literally just watched that the other day. I hadn't seen it. So I'm going to watch it.
I've been holding off. So I've been holding off.
Well, I had nothing else to do, and I thought, you know what, I better prepare for this. So I watched it, and I'm going to watch it one more time prior to when we record. And as for us in the Monarch Legacy of Monsters, that's coming, I believe, Friday the 23rd. So there were two things coming soon, featuring myself and DJ Neko from the Metal Tavern Radio. And there's one more other thing which is coming on the 21st, which is my brand new segment, which is I'm really pumped for, because you're my co-host on that segment, and it's the Retro Classic Movie Show. But we're going to have a special guest to launch the first episode, and it is obviously Preston Downey, aka That Fat Samurai Guy.
Mr. Samurai. Yeah. He's kind of the guy that, you know, influenced me and obviously influenced you a little bit to do stuff like this. And he's a great dude. I really like Preston a lot. Got great content. There's a lot of great interviews and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, he kind of was the one that kind of helped me get the idea of doing this. And like you see, he influenced me a lot. But you're the one that gave us the kick through the door when you allowed me to be a guest co-host on your channel, give me that tiny little tease of what it would be like to run my own channel. So you're a big part of why I'm here today. Is I would still consider myself an amateur content creator, but I'm just going with the flow, taking it day by day, step by step.
And that's all you can do, and I'm glad that you finally did it, because I love your content. A lot of great and well thought out reviews and stuff like that. So I always knew you had it in you. So I'm glad that you're doing that and it's doing well for you. So I'm happy about that.
Thank you.
All right. So obviously I'm going to go through the 34 live action films. This is basically going to be my rankings and my tier list. But of course, Mr. Lambert, if he wants to give input to like whether he thinks I'm too low or too high, or if I'm right where I need to be, he can comment on that. That's why he's here, to kind of just go with me and go down memory lane here a little bit. So basically, what this does is this is off a tier maker. It's a tiermaker.com or something like that. And you can create your own tier list. Now, I've seen Aaron Penn from Cult of Cinema do this and some others. It's a fun little way just to kind of go through and rank whatever you want to do. I've done like action movies in the past, horror movies, etc. In this case, I figured, well, let me do Godzilla and try to do the films. And so what some people will do is they'll try to do like, you'll pick a film and then they'll just choose which tier it's going to be in. So I have like the S tier, which is the very top. A tier, B tier, C tier, and D
Yeah.
tier.
I think I've seen Rob on ETN do this as well. I'm
Right,
sure he's not, but I don't know if he did the full 33 or if he just did his top 10.
right.
I just remember he was doing a live one day and I just happened to glance on it. And I
Yeah.
think he was doing something what you're about to do, so this is going to be fun.
Yeah, and so, but what I'm going to do is I'm just actually going to start with the last tier first, D tier, and I'm going to go through and each I'll place them in how I would see them. So really, the last one will be the very last one of that tier. So let me pull up our little thing here, and let's see what's the best way to do this. Probably this way. And
Yeah.
so yeah, so I'm going to start with our D tier, and the very last one, and I don't remember because we didn't really keep track of like paper. I don't think on the one we did two
Yeah.
months ago.
Well,
So I know that
I remember straight away what I had as my least favourite film. And
right.
I think I made a good point of why it was, but I'll let you go ahead and
Yeah, so in my case, I think it might be the same one. I know there's some changes here and there. So this one, I actually saw this on the Godzilla Marathon channel on Pluto the other night, and it didn't really change my mind and how I felt about it. And as a kid, it probably didn't bother as much because you're young, you don't really care. You just see big monsters and you're happy. You're kind of like Hulk and Ragnarok. You're like big monster. That's all you care about. So some of the silliness that came with it, like even though we know a lot of Godzilla films from the past are kind of campy and whatnot, uh, this one for all monsters attack, right? So unfortunately, it's going to be the last one in the list for me. The kid is too much of a focus. This is kind of like some of my problem with some of the earlier Gamera films, even though I do love them. I think as time goes on, as you get older, you're kind of looking for something that's a little bit more mature in terms of story writing. So obviously, you and I, we've talked about Godzilla minus one. Like the story is exceptional. It's made for adults,
yeah,
really. Even though as a kid, you could probably still enjoy it because Godzilla's in it. But for the rest of us that are getting older, this is the kind of stuff that we want out of these kind of
yeah,
films.
yeah.
So
Well,
that's pretty
that's
much where I am with that. So how do you feel about that placement?
spot on. I would definitely agree. Like I say, back in the 1950s when the first Godzilla came out in 1951, it was more serious, more grounded. It had a serious message. Then after
Yeah,
the release of Gamera a few years later, Toho realised that they had to kind of follow suit and have like more kid friendly versions of Godzilla. And as you know, it was like started off dark and serious, and as the Showa era continued, each film seemed to go more kid friendly and over the top. And for me, that isn't the reason why I voted this as my least favourite, not just because it was kid friendly. It's the fact that it is basically a stock footage film. It basically features, it's basically like, if you remember Gamera, the last film of the series, of that series, it basically had a handful of new footage, and then it just featured him facing all of the villains from the previous films, but it was all like the same fight sequences. They just did it to make a quick buck, basically. And basically that's what this film is. It's just trying to create more money off what they've had in the past. And so that, as well as the kid factor, is why it was my least favourite.
yeah. Okay, so that was at 34, and that's under D tier. And so, like these ones right now, I'm going through all D tier, but they're obviously gonna go from worst to the best in this particular category. So, at number 33, in 2021, they did a so much better job of storytelling. Of course, it's not really anybody's fault when it was originally done for King Kong versus Godzilla because budgets and everything else play a factor in some of this stuff, and you never know exactly how things are going to pan out years later with this franchise, which is kind of amazing. It's gone on for so long, which we all love, of course. But I always disliked the idea that Kong was going to beat Godzilla in the way that they did in '63. So I do have the original King Kong versus Godzilla here in the D tier. I didn't really like when Kong was kind of getting beat up and Godzilla was kind of getting the best of him. All of a sudden we had the electricity happen, and all of a sudden Kong was able to spring
Mm,
back and use that, which was never part of Kong's like
yeah.
arsenal as an ape or whatever, even in the American version of King Kong. So it came off as a little bit weird. Some people still stand by today that Kong is the winner and whatnot, but we know that once the
Well, you don't
2021 version came
actually.
out,
Yeah, you didn't actually see what became of Godzilla in that film, the
right,
original. All you know is they fell off the rolled down into the ocean. You just see Kong kind of swimming away, and then you don't see Godzilla. So there's no real inkling that he actually's dead or anything. They just ended it on a cliffhanger. And I think
right,
originally they did that deliberately to do a sequel, which I think they were planning, but it didn't materialize. And I do find it hilarious how in the modern version, the new version, the Godzilla vs Kong, the 2021, how basically at the end of the original they fall into the ocean. Kong's swimming away, but in the modern version, Kong's basically screwed in the water. Godzilla is a pure beast. He's like a crocodile, the way he swims. I always
yeah.
found that crazy and ironic, and it would have been, even though it didn't I would have loved to see a scene in the original film where Kong's swimming away and you just see him getting dragged under the water.
Yeah, that would have been great, actually.
Like something out of Jaws.
Right. Ah! Yeah, and that's the thing about the 2021 version is that the story again is much better. Like, so going into that movie before we knew Mecha Godzilla would be a part of it was that you had to sit there and think to yourself, well, how are they going to make Kong uh, competitive with Godzilla? Like, we knew that initially it was kind of like just throwing shit in the wind and hoping that it would work, but in this film, the 2021 film, is that they brought in the axe and of course the atomic power that charge it up and everything. So that was very creative, and it gave
Mm,
Kong a bit of a way to compete with Godzilla, which
yeah.
made sense.
I think they've
So yeah,
made Kong more. I know Kong's always been considered a sympathetic character, but they've kind of made, like you said, they've made him more of a respectable character now. Where in the
yeah,
first one, he just come across, the original one, he just come across as this big dumb ape who just couldn't take on Godzilla unless, for whatever reason, which I never got the logic, if he knocked him into the water. He can swim away, but Godzilla drowns. It just didn't make sense. Where
right,
then, but the modern Godzilla versus Kong is they've made Kong more not just sympathetic still, but they've made him more respectable because he uses his mind, he uses tools, he uses craftsmanship to take on Godzilla. So it is nice to see, like obviously we know through the history of this franchise, whenever Godzilla faced an enemy, they always had some sort of fire power, laser power. If they were a robot or something, they always had a missile or something. Where the realism of Godzilla vs Kong 2021 is that Kong had none of that. He basically
yeah,
he had to use the surroundings and his wit to take on Godzilla, who was just all powerful. And like you mentioned before, we're all kind of new going into Godzilla versus Kong 2021 that them two were probably going to end up teaming up against something. And I'm kind of was glad that the reveal was Mecha Godzilla because he is a phenomenal opponent. And how they both worked together to take him down at the very end was just outstanding. Brilliant, brilliant scene. Just a great way to end it.
yeah. That's a big thing for me too, because leading up to it, obviously both Godzilla and Kong were what they call Earth protectors. So, you had to come up with a reason why these two would fight to begin with. So initially, it's just basically just territorial type stuff. But then when Mechagodzilla is introduced, it gives them a common goal, a common enemy. So like that made a lot of sense, and I like the way they worked that in as well.
Yeah.
All right, 32. This probably will not make Rob very happy, but it's a film that I like. I think story wise, it's pretty good. I don't have any real problems with it in terms of story, but I never liked the look of the villain in this, and it's what year is this one? I didn't give a year, but it's Godzilla versus Hedorah, and I know that Rob really likes this film a lot. I wish I could move. There we go. That's what I want. All right. So yeah, or the other name they had at the time was Godzilla versus the Smog Monster. It's just I don't really like the look of Hedorah in this. It looks a little bit weird, like almost like Gumby. But you know, it's a good story, and of course, it was one of the more, I guess, at the time, thought-provoking storylines with the pollution and you know the damage that we do to the earth and whatnot. So they were kind of utilizing that. How do you feel about where I've placed this one?
I personally would have placed it higher, but that's just me.
Okay.
Where you've got your place, I would have put Godzilla versus Space Godzilla. That's just because I just remember when I did our ranking way back when, I placed Godzilla versus Space Godzilla lower because I was sick of the fact that they kept on using double gangers of Godzilla as villains. Like, I think one's enough. Mechagodzilla from 1972 was, you know, that's all we needed. It was a phenomenal, you know, and he's the most popular of the double gangers, where I just think Mechagodzilla's overrated the way they talk about him, how being like the big bad and all this. I thought the design of him was a bit kooky. He looked like he was obese. So that's just my opinion, but when it comes to Godzilla versus Hedorah, I would have had it higher, just me personally, because I liked the story and I liked how back in the Showa era this film kind of brought, even though the design of Hedorah's cookie and a bit, you know, like you said, gummy, I did like the fact that it had serious message in it, and I liked how it had that kind of wacky, darker tone to it. And I think that's why it stands out for me personally, as being one of the better of the Showa era films later on, because it went from serious to kid friendly to kind of, yes, still being kid oriented, because it was trying to teach kid about pollution and, you know, stuff like that, toxic waste, but it had like a darker tint to it, and it was in the, you know, the crazy 70s era.
Yeah. At number 31, this is another one that had kind of like, it wasn't really on a serious note like Hedorah, but you know, when I look back and I've seen, you know, rewatched this a couple times just because it pops on again on the Pluto channel. For those that don't have Pluto on your Roku's or whatever, they have actual specific channel dedicated to Godzilla movies and stuff like that. So this one pops up a lot. It's Ibra, the Horror from the Deep. And I don't know, I do enjoy a lot of this film. There's a lot of cool stuff about it. I just can't get past that, you know, the lobster. Yeah, he's not really that exciting as a villain. So, but they kind of approach the film almost like in a horror movie type thing, because it starts out, you know, these guys are on a ship and they find like some little critter on there that's eating some guys and some of the shipmates and whatnot. And then, of course, I just watched this the other night again just because it was on. And here's the thing, like, no matter what I rank them, I think we all agree that we would watch these no matter what, because we're just big Godzilla fans and stuff like that. But I had forgotten that Mothra was even in the fucking film. Like, that's how long it's been since I've seen it. Because she just shows up towards the end. I'm like, oh yeah, she is in this. And I just totally forgot about that. So how do you feel about this particular film?
Well, I would have put that lower than fucking Hedorah, put it that way. But I do like, I like you said, the horror elements are interesting. And I like how it starts out. And I do like the concept of that. it basically it's about slavery on this island, and the red bamboo are using the people from Infant Island and all that to like harvest the stuff that keeps Eberra from rising above and basically taking out all the boats that approach. So I do like that element. I just wish, like you say, when it comes to Eberra, they could have done more with the character. They could have made him look a bit more fearful, a bit more, dangerous looking. But we have to remember this was actually meant to be a Kong film.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Yeah, well, Toho made, obviously, is it King Kong Escapes, and then they were going to do a second Kong film, but unfortunately, I don't know if Toho lost the rights to do Kong again, because it makes sense. If you remember, Kong has the power of electricity. And as you know, in this film, Godzilla's kind of asleep or hibernating within that cave. And they use the electrical wire to revive him with the lightning from the storm. Well, that was intended for Kong, because obviously with the power of electricity from his fingers in the previous films.
So he's basically like Jason Voorhees.
So basically, I don't kind of blame Eberra if Eberra looks a bit goofy, because maybe, it was him versus, Kong, and it would make more sense in him being a bigger threat potentially against Kong, because if you think about it, Kong's swimming in the ocean, and if he goes into the ocean, Eberra has the opportunity to drag him under the water and drown him. And there's some elements of the actual fight with Eberra and Godzilla you can kind of make out that Kong should be in his place. Especially right at the end when Godzilla jumps off the end of the island into the ocean. I could actually see Kong doing that and then swimming away. So for me, I kind of forgive it for those elements, but still, they could have done a better job overall with the Eberra character.
Yeah. At number 30, I have Son of Godzilla. And really, I think when it comes to like these last 5, including this one, like I could have mixed them around. It probably wouldn't have mattered too much except for the last one. But this one, though, I did enjoy. Like, I remember seeing this one in the theaters as a kid, and the praying mantis trying to eat the egg and gets a little Godzilla Manila. I don't know. I think we all kind of agree Manila is kind of like a weird looking baby for Godzilla.
It's a walking albino fucking maggot. That is what he looks like. He's got that horrible face. He's just a weird looking little fucking. No wonder Godzilla doesn't like him.
Right. He's like, grow some balls. Come on, get moving. And I think that's kind of like why it's so funny when you see Final Wars when again they're using Manila and that, and of course he's small enough to get in that fucking truck, and then all of a sudden he grows up a little bit. Just kind of silly. Okay, so 29. This one I can tell you for a fact was much lower when we did it 10 months ago, and we've talked about it at length. I have a hard time even considering it a Godzilla film, but I've kind of like got a little bit lenient on it, and I've appreciated it a little bit more now than I probably initially had. And probably a lot of that's because I still do like the fact that Dean Devlin and company tried something different with the Godzilla lore. It didn't really play out the way that we all kind of liked, but the fact that they got creative about it and tried to do something different with it all gets a little bit of respect for me. Of course, that's 1998's Godzilla. And obviously my major problems with a lot of here is even if you take out like they thought it was a giant iguana, which is fine, but the whole ending with the babies, like just too much Jurassic Park raptor like looking things, and is cute. You know, it's fun. It was a fun movie in terms of like just dumb shit that you're popcorn eating and watching. But uh, yeah, they missed a mark. I just credit for trying something different, but it just missed a mark.
Yeah, like a lot of people, I think when it first came out, were initially 100% against it and were like, this is not a Godzilla movie. This is not Godzilla. It's a great monster movie, but it's not Godzilla. And if you just called it, for me, I personally think this would have been a great. We've done a discussion on it on my channel. This would be more or less a great Gorgo reboot. If this was called Gorgo, I think no one would have an issue. The fact it's called Godzilla and it's basically it doesn't have any of the elements of the Godzilla we know and love. I think that's what a lot of people had issues with. I personally am always divided. I do think it's a great monster movie. You have to call it Godzilla basically in the US, but I do know in Japan he's been relicensed under Toho as just Zilla. He's not called Godzilla, he's called Zilla in Toho in Japan. Yeah. So they actually consider him a completely different creature. And I believe, I don't know if it's Godzilla 2000. It's one of the films after obviously this came out, and in the where they actually mention, there's a creature that's just attacked Matt. Well, no, it's not Final Wars when he comes back. It's a film before. I actually think it's Godzilla 2000 where they're talking about how they're going to counteract with Godzilla, and they talk about how there's a creature that's just attacked New York who they thought was Godzilla and isn't, and they're actually referencing Godzilla 1998.
That's interesting. Okay. I didn't catch that. That's interesting though. Yeah, I have to go back and now watch that. Just pick up on that. Well, yeah, and I think it's good too that, you know, America, Hollywood and all that, they gave Toho the rights to use the creature in their own film. So they even, you know, even the joke with the X, you know, saying, yeah, you stupid lizard iguana or whatever, like when he couldn't beat Godzilla, and then, you know, they just kind of mock him a little bit. So they know most people came out of that film not really crazy about America's version of Godzilla at the time. So anyway, I guess he either got stuck or whatever, lost Kevin there. So the last one, let's see, he might be back. Let's see how it goes here. There he is.
Sorry, I lost connection there. But yes, like that didn't happen. Let's pretend it didn't happen.
It was only for a second.
So basically, I'll just end it with saying I think a lot of people have softened on Godzilla, and I think a lot of the fans who are just total haters now see the benefits of having this film. You know, it showed you what we needed, and it showed you the things to avoid in the future.
Right, exactly. All right, so the last one I have in this tier for tier D is Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. Now, there's multiple reasons for this. Again, none of this is like me hating too much on stuff. There's films in here that I don't watch that often, but I still do occasionally watch them when I can. So the issue that I've always found with this particular film is that I can't get over the time traveler guy who's like the slow-mo running. I know at the time that they had to work with what they had, but like it always makes me laugh too much when I'm watching it. And the funny thing is, like, this film does have some sentimental value because of the whole like early Godzilla stages. So we have the Japanese guy who was a soldier who came across a young Godzilla at the time, or at least a dinosaur. So this almost kind of mimics -1 a little bit in terms of the early incarnation of Godzilla. And then, of course, later he faces Godzilla again, which I always thought was pretty cool and a good part of the story. But the other thing that was weird was how King Ghidorah comes about. So we've got these three little critters, you know, that get caught up in the time travel machine and then the forming to become King Ghidorah. That was always a little bit silly to me too, but you know, again, original thought was going into when they made the movie, so I give it a lot of credit there with that. So, where do you stand on this one?
I quite enjoy this film. Like, obviously, you can tell the influences because it was made in 1991 or 1992. I can't remember the exact year. So it was around the time Terminator 2 came out, and you can clearly tell that the cyborg character, like you mentioned, this future guy, he's influenced by the T-2000. That scene when he's basically charging up the street towards the car. I love the new kind of redesign of King Ghidorah. He was big, he was epic, and obviously I really love the Mecha King Ghidorah at the end. But like you say, the futuristic elements of it with these. I didn't like the villains. The villains for me, they were just stereotypical, over the top, you know, megalomaniac type villains. But what I did enjoy is I did like the time travel element into the past. I liked how you got like kind of a more of an origin story to how Godzilla was created, and that connection between him and the soldier who then becomes obviously the lead, the president of this organization. And like you said, the scene you mentioned at the end when he's in the building and he's got tears in his eye and he's saluting and he kind of is looking at Godzilla, and for a minute Godzilla looks like he's having the same kind of emotion back. Then he just realizes who I am and just boom, take the building out. And I thought, so it is a film that has some really good elements and scenes to it, but like you say, some of the plot and some of the time travel elements aren't that interesting for me. In the way King Ghidorah was created, it's not how he's created. It's the Dorat, the little critters you mentioned, who you just cannot imagine these three little like rats with wings are gonna form this huge creature. It's a bit unbelievable, but hey ho, I enjoy the majority of that film.
Yeah. All right, so that does it for the tier D. Now we're getting ready to the C tier, and initially this film, I hated it, like so hated it. And I think when we did our thing 10 months ago, like I probably had it much lower than I do now, but much like 98, I've come to appreciate it a little bit more. I do like some things about the design, the final design of it, and that of course is 2016's Shin Godzilla. I do like his attack. I mean, it's not your traditional Godzilla, you know, atomic blast and stuff, but it was pretty unique. In some ways, you know, they were almost precursing to -1 in some ways, even though it's, you know, more -1's more like, you know, legendary in some ways with the lighting up. The way that the scale started popping up on -1, you know, they were trying something different again. So I've always given Toho credit for thinking outside the box. I don't remember where you had this film ranked in your list.
I didn't have it that high, I don't think, because I understand what they were trying to do story point wise. They were trying to it was obviously about the disaster that happened in Tokyo at the time, which was with the power plant, I believe. And it was also trying to showcase, you know, how troublesome it is for the government to make real decisions in real time when there's things going on within the country and in the world. So it was trying to highlight all of these political elements as well as that element. As for Godzilla himself, I've never liked the design. I never have. For me, he just looks like a zombified Tyrannosaurus Rex with an extra long tail. The only for me good qualities of the film is, like you say, the special effects that were used. How this was like a precursor to -1. It's basically them testing the elements between suitmation and CGI, because I'm not sure if this was completely CGI or if they used puppetry with a little bit of suitmation. I'm not sure if it was all CGI, but for me, I just was disappointed in the design, and the only, for me, things I enjoyed were, like you see, the laser basically attacks at the end. But I do also think, as much as I enjoyed it, I think it was a bit over the top, and I think they made Godzilla 2 unbeatable, if that makes sense. They made him too powerful. Like, there's being super powerful, and then there's being to the point where they've just made out that he's never going to be beaten. And in the end, he really wasn't. He was just basically frozen on the spot. And they'd left it at that for, I think, for him to eventually reawaken and to potentially do a sequel, which they were planning on doing a Shin Godzilla 2, and then that was cancelled, and then there was this talk of this World of Godzilla franchise, which Toho had announced, but then that went silent, and then eventually we got the emergence of Godzilla -1, which I, in my heart, am hoping is going to be the beginning of a new, multiverse franchise with other kaiju, but time will tell.
Yeah, it's true. So here's the thing with the tier C and B. These are films that I probably don't watch on the regular. And I could, like, depending on how I feel, these could all kind of like jump, fall down, just skip over each other, whatever. But I tried to rank them best to how I actually feel about them. So obviously all the list is how I want. Like, obviously when I get towards the top, we know that those are really the best of the crop for me. But so whether these other ones in these next two tiers, like, it's not so much that I am going to stay stronghold on my picks, because it could either go up or down depending on my mood. But we're going to start with number 26, which would be, whoops, what did I do that for? Sorry about that. We have Mothra versus Godzilla. And again, these are films that I don't generally watch on the norm. But
is this the Showa era Mothra, or is it the Heisei Mothra?
I would. It's the earlier version of it, so it's way back.
So it's the Showa era Mothra.
Yeah. So yeah, I should have put the years next time. It would have helped determine, because I know they do copy each other occasionally. So how do you feel about that one? As far as, like, where I place it?
Well, I've always said, well, you see, I think I rank these very near the top, because I always call these next three films, I in my mind call them the Showa era trilogy, because it was three separate films that told an overlong story, and that was Godzilla versus Mothra, then it was Ghidorah the three-headed dragon, and then you had Invasion of the Astro Monsters. So, or Godzilla versus Monster Zero, however you like to put it. So, they were like an overall story, and then obviously you had Rodan and Mothra, the separate, independent, original standalone film. So, for me, it was an overall story arc and joint universe. They did it way before Marvel did it. So I always have ranked that and the other two I've mentioned quite high.
Okay. So next one I have here at 25 is Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, All Monsters Attack. And again, like, I'm not really just stuck in one place. Like, this could be much higher depending on the day, or it could be lower. None of these would go below C tier, though. Like, they would never be that low. But again, these are films that I do enjoy. Just I don't watch them enough to really get that excited about it as I do other films, obviously. So, are you feeling the same way here with this one?
I w- I would have put that as quite high as well, as one of my favourites, just because I just think it's the whole overall story, and it's just the brutality of Godzilla in this one, and how fierce, how dangerous he is. And I always loved that scene when you see him first enter the bay, and you see his mouth light up, and he's about to just drop his atomic breath, and you hear there's a teacher in the school, and you see the windows shake and the kids in the class, and she just looks out the window, and you just see the giant mushroom cloud, and you just hear her say atom bomb, and it like gives us the chills to this day. That's probably my favourite scene in that film. So I do think it's a good. The only negative I would say is I wasn't a fan of the design of King Ghidorah. I understand they made King Ghidorah for the first time a hero and a good guy, but I wasn't quite a fan of the design in this film. I wish they had made the design more to the original, because it's like a mixture of a proper traditional Japanese dragon.
And I think
obviously
I
the
think that's
King
part of
Ghidorah, I
why.
know.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why it's so low on my list, because I always had a problem with Ghidorah being like a good guy. Like it just never really worked with me because I was so used to him being the villain in all the earlier films. So I do think that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Like, who was the third one? They had Mothra, and there was like a third one, right?
Baragon.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I didn't mind him. Like, he's the original thing. He got his ass kicked pretty easy, but
yeah.
Yeah, but I will say this: like Godzilla, like as far as like a menacing version, is like pretty scary.
Yeah, I do know that the particular Godzilla design is very high in a lot of fans' lists.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as like the look, I can see why. Sure. And I mean, some people really do enjoy the movie too, so that's fine too. At number 24, not to be confused with the 74 one, but we have Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. And is this the Heisei era?
This is the Millennium era.
Millennium era. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I always get confused with some of these. Who did what?
Well, each era's named, except the Millennium era. Each era's named after the emperor of that year or that time. So you've got Showa, you've got Heisei, you've got Millenniums obviously for the turn in 2000, and now the new era is, I can't even pronounce it, it's something like the Rensei era or the Rawa era. It's got, so...
Okay. Let's see, number 23. I believe this is the movie that introduced Fire Rodan. That's Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2. And again, not a bad film. But this era, like this stuff just didn't like fly with me as well as the earlier stuff. But I was always glad, because like I remember as I was getting older in the 90s, like I didn't even know a lot of these films even existed till much later, because like they weren't advertising as much where I was, and I wasn't really paying attention to movies that much outside of the mainstream stuff like Jean-Claude Van Damme or whatever. So when they started doing all the 90s stuff, I just wasn't paying attention.
Yeah. The one thing I like about that film is I do like what they did with Rodan. They kind of made him more badass, more fierce, with him having like the fire Rodan element to him. So I do think that I'm not a bigger fan of the redesign of Mechagodzilla in that film. I prefer the original Mechagodzilla design, the more demonic cyborg design, and I like obviously Kiyu's design in Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, and the Godzilla design in Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, which is the film you've put in before that one. It's one of my favourite Godzilla designs. In fact, when we were at G-Fest, I seen it on sale, and I bought it and got it FedEx straight to my house, the X Plus figure, which I still haven't put out yet because I'm still waiting to redecorate this room and cut some shelving up.
And I should mention to those who are going to watch this that Mr. Lambert recently put up a video of his Gorgo figurine, so please go check that out. It's very cool stuff. I don't really do the videos like that, but maybe I should sometime just take a time and go through my figurines. I got a lot of different things from Godzilla stuff to horror stuff, so maybe I should just do that at one point. Let's see. We are at number 22, and this is Godzilla and Mothra: The Battle for Earth.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that one?
I prefer. I like I say, the original Godzilla vs. Mothra, I do consider quite high, but I do enjoy this one as well. I liked how it had the element of Godzilla, and then you had kind of the two different kind. You had the yin and the yang versions of Mothra, the good and the evil with Batra and Mothra. I thought was different and unique, and it was like the spirit of the earth coming together.
Yeah, I did kind of like that too, because it's kind of like, it's probably the first time you saw like Mothra like have a rival, but then there was like this kinship as well. You know, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, because one's like the spirit of the earth, and the other one's like the elements of the earth, like the anger of the earth is now intensified to create Batra. So obviously, she's always been on the positives of Mother Nature and the earth elements and all that, where Batra's the opposite. She's like all the anger, all the pain put together, and obviously in the end they come together because for the greater good.
The greater good. I'm just gonna throw in a hot fuzz take there. All right, so the last one I have for tier 3 or tier C is one that I know people hold up in a higher standing, and I think even you probably have it much higher than I do. It's no real particular reason why I have it here. It's just there's some other ones ahead of it that I like a lot better, and that is, of course, the Terror of Mechagodzilla.
Yeah, I have that quite high. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
I like the concept of the plot. Like, it's very cool. You know, the jaded doctor who using mind control and stuff. I forget what is the creature's name, the other one.
Titanosaurus.
Yes, thank you. I don't know why I was
Dr. Mafuni and Titanosaurus. And the daughter's called Katsura.
Right, so I like the daughter angle and stuff, but kind of like Hedorah, like Titanosaurus is kind of like not the most wowing of creatures. Like, I don't know. I thought he wasn't bad, but just kind of weird, and I just never really got into that particular kaiju.
Yeah.
But it's still a pretty good story, so I mean that's why it's, you know, at least where it is on my list.
Kind of reminds me of like Kong though from the 2021 film, how Titanosaurus has no real abilities, but it's just pure strength and power. It's like a raw, you know, animal that just has to use its gut. It's intenseness and all that against like Godzilla, who's got the atomic breath. And as you're seeing in the film, Titanosaurus lifts Godzilla up by the snout of its nose. So that's what I quite enjoyed about the character of Titanosaurus. And there's been talks, even the director of Godzilla -1 said if he were to do a sequel, he would want him to face another creature. And I would like it to be more grounded, like -1, and not go the over the top route. And I think like a character or a creature like Titanosaurus would be a great opponent in a more modern day, you know, a Godzilla sequel to -1.
Yeah, I saw that tweet and I was really excited. I hope he gets a greenlit. I hope he gets greenlit for a couple more, because I think when you do something like -1 and you're thinking about doing another one, that you should just give him a trilogy, and I think he does a really great job. I would still say that I think, in my opinion, since he'll probably follow the steps of -1, I would go with Godzilla Raids again. If you can give it whatever name you
Yeah.
want, but I
A
want
lot
to
of people
see,
have been pushing for Anguillus to come back.
yes, because we just haven't seen much of him, like in terms of reimagining. And unfortunately, Legendary, they played around with the idea with artwork and like some of the skeletons we saw in the films. But it would have been cool to see what they could have done with Anguirus. So
Well, it was actually confirmed by Michael Dougherty, who directed Godzilla King of the Monsters, that scene where you see Dr. Zerazawa, obviously sacrificing himself to kind of revive Godzilla outside of his temple, the underground temple, like underwater, temple, that's like Atlantis. He actually confirmed there's a giant skeleton outside of the cave, like outside the entranceway, that looks like Anguillus. He actually confirmed that was Anguillus.
yeah,
He
that's
actually
nice.
confirmed that he's actually perished. So it would be nice if he's not going to have a full-fledged appearance in the Monsterverse, if they at least allowed him to do a flashback to see where
Oh
he
yeah,
was. And
right, definitely. And that's the thing. I wish I had enough money in the world just to force those guys to keep doing, like even do like Rodan or Mothra movies. Like it'd be so amazing. But that's wishful thinking there with that.
yeah.
All right. So at number 20, we're breaking into tier B now. And this is going to be Godzilla versus Megaguirus. And I do enjoy this a bit. Of course, I love this version of Godzilla. Of course, it follows in the footsteps of 2000 and stuff like that. Just a cool look, pretty cool. Megaguirus is kind of a cool villain. Not super new, but close enough that I really dug it. How do you feel about that particular film?
I really enjoy this film, and one thing I really enjoy is I love the beginning, where obviously you see that practicing with this cannon, and then obviously Megaguirus is like an interdimensional being that comes through that portal, or I think a queen, a small young queen Megaguirus comes out, and the next thing you know, yes, I love the scene in the alleyway where you have them two young, couple on a date, and you see one of the Meganulon fly out, and it just, you see the blood, and it has a good horror element that I don't think we've seen in a Godzilla film in a long time, and that's what really surprised me, is that they actually took it that way right at the beginning, and then obviously later on throughout the film it kind of dies down when it, in terms of that element, but it also is a film that kind of used a lot of the earlier CGI to test on, especially on the island where there's thousands of the Megalulon flying around Godzilla. This was before Godzilla against Mechagodzilla and Tokyo SOS, where they use more elements, or even GMK. So this for me was the first testing ground to see if they could integrate CGI with suitmation, and for me they did a great job.
Yeah. And you spoke of Tokyo SOS, and that's the next one that comes up for me. Definitely I've appreciated this one a little bit more as the time has gone on. I know this is like usually a real big favorite for a lot of Godzilla fans. I know Rob probably has it much higher on his list too. I think he almost has it number 1, I think. I don't remember, but
I do like this film.
Yeah.
So I like this, but what I loved about this is I loved how they modernised the original Mothra design and made it more mainstream, and not mainstream, but made it more modern. It's like that's what they basically did. They just took the original design from the 1960s and just modernised this design, and I think for me it's my favourite Mothra design ever out of all of the films. Like even the JMK monster Mothra I found slightly off-putting because it was a mixture with the Hornet, with the Moth, where when it comes to the Monsterverse design of Mothra, I find that more appealing than the one in GMK, but this Mothra is, because it's a more modernised version of the original, I thoroughly enjoyed it. The story I thought was interesting, but for me, it's more or less, it's just the same as the first film we've seen, except they added Mothra into the story. For me, that's the only difference. So for me, it's on par with the first one, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla.
Agreed. At number 18, this is the one that I was a little surprised that you would have much lower, but it's Godzilla versus Space Godzilla. Now, I think I agree with you about, like, obviously it was being a little bit too samey, mimicking Godzilla's look and stuff like that, but I still thought that it had like a very unique look, and I kind of enjoyed the story a little bit. It's a little bit weirder, obviously, but certainly was different than some of the other stuff they were doing at the time. I kind of enjoyed the plot of this.
Yeah, I just couldn't take the Mechagodzilla serious. I just thought if you're talking, not Mechagodzilla, Space Godzilla serious.
Mogira.
Yeah, the story itself isn't that bad. When I think of Space Godzilla and everyone's referring to it as the net is a big bad, I just have never seen him as a big bad. Because and I think Mechagodzilla is more frightening than Space Godzilla, and I just don't like it when too many franchises have more than one doppelganger of a hero. Like, obviously you have Superman has Bizarro, but there isn't a second, kind of doppelganger. And, there's other franchises that have evil doppelgangers, but they don't take it to the extreme as what they did with Space Godzilla. And if they were going to make him like the big bad, I just think they could have made the story elements with him a lot more darker, similar to what they did with Godzilla vs. Destroyer. Godzilla vs. Destroyer, for me, is ranked very high. And this one, I think, just lets us down with a lot of the story elements and the overall use of Space Godzilla. I was expecting a lot more.
Yeah, I agree. Although I do kind of like it better some of the other ones, but yeah, I get your points on that for sure. Let's see, number 17. Now 17 and 16 can almost, switch at any time depending on my feelings at the time, but this is how I put it together. 17, I have Invasion of the Astro Monster. And yeah, so like I said, I think, in fact, I'll go ahead and let me see here 1 second. What is that other one? I have to try to match up these. Where is it? There it is. Okay. So yeah, I'm gonna let you comment on both of these in a minute. So the other one that I have at 16 is Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster. So what is your feelings about both of these films?
Well, it's like what I was saying before. Like, if you combine the original Godzilla vs. Mothra alongside these two, they make the perfect Showa trilogy. It's like a continuing story, similar to what they did in the Heisei era after Godzilla vs. Biollante. Each story in each film had, yes, there were different stories, but they're all interlinked. There were always an element in them that linked you to the previous films. So it was kind of like a shared universe even in the Heisei era. And these three films obviously put that Mothra, Rodan, Godzilla, it put them all in it kind of, put the tick on the mark that this is one big shared universe. That Godzilla's previous films, obviously the Mothra solo film, the Rodan solo film, were all interlinked in all one big multiverse. So for me, all three of them I would rank together, and I would rank them high.
Okay. So I'm too low with it, as you say.
Yeah. Well, it's your ranking. You gotta
Right,
go what you
right,
feel, my brother.
right. 15. I actually saw this in the theater when I was like 14 or 15. This is like the last time that I had seen, well, not last time. I saw 98 in the theater, but the last time I saw the traditional Godzilla, and of course that is Godzilla 1985. Really kind of loved the concept at the time, even though I've always been, like I said, I'm more of the hero, anti-hero Godzilla versus villain, but the fact that they were playing off of 1954 when they did this was a lot of fun. Like, I'm glad they approached it that way. And again, I think if I recall, I do think Raymond Burr was in this one too.
Yeah, he
Um,
was.
and the funny thing about Burr is that every time when I watched 54 the other day, um, every time I see him now, I just think of Perry Mason. I really don't even think about his stuff in Godzilla much when I see him. So it's like, oh, it's Perry Mason, not Raymond Burr. Uh,
I think it's good, like how they brought him back for this. It's like, for me, I know every film since 1954 throughout the Toho, films. They always go back to the first one and always say that is the first. So if Godzilla's still around in any of the other films, they always bring it up. Oh, he was gone. He was killed in 1954, and you mustn't have killed him. He's back, or is it the same Godzilla from 1954? Where for me, if any of the Toho films have a direct or the direct sequel to 1954, it's this one,
mhm.
because it's got a similar tone. I love the story. I love, like you say, Raymond Burr bringing him back, and I
Mhm.
even just the ending of it when they're at the top of the volcano and hearing that epic kind of painful roar as he falls in. For
Yeah.
me, it's just an amazing movie.
Yeah, it was always an interesting thing about, even with minus one, with those particular films, is that they gave you almost a sympathetic feeling for Godzilla, even though he was destroying shit, you know?
Yeah.
All right, so
That's one of the beautiful things about the Godzilla franchise. It's a giant force of nature that you still kind of have sympathy for.
yeah, right. Um, so with these last two for tier B, I'm gonna put them together like we did the other ones, mainly because we talked about how the director for minus one, how he might do another film, which kind of plays in, like, we know we talked about maybe doing Godzilla raids again, which would be great. But if he did another film that was kind of outside of that, I think maybe Destroy All Monsters might be one of those ones to pop up. And then I'm gonna go ahead and throw Godzilla raids again here because um, we have been talking about those two. I do think, because I think we all kind of like it when, even with King of the Monsters, when they brought a lot of our favorite creatures on screen together. Seeing something like Destroy All Monsters done like a modern day with the technology we have would be quite amazing, I think.
Yeah, like you said though, you're spot on the money. I think if they did it go down that route where they've done a standalone Godzilla movie, and then if they did this, I think they need to build up to it if they do a trilogy. Like it's like the Batman, the Dark Knight trilogy. You had the first one, then you had the Joker, and the second one, and then the third one. I still think the second one's better than the third one, but I do really still like and appreciate the third film within the Dark Knight trilogy. And I think if they did something similar, if they did a minus one trilogy where we've had a solo Godzilla film, then we'll have one rival monster, Anguillus, in the sequel. Slowly build it, and then the third one just go all out. Maybe not make it on the level of Destroy All Monsters, have like 10 monsters. Even if there's three, like King of the Monsters, even if there's just 4 other monsters. And
Yeah,
you could make it the top 4: Godzilla, Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah again.
yeah, yeah. It's kind of funny because I think back, like, even though I love King of the Monsters and of course Godzilla versus Kong 2021, I kind of feel like those movies should have been reversed. because it's kind of like they shot their load a lot on King of the Monsters by bringing all those creatures in there. Like I would have liked a little bit more build up to that. You know, with King of the Monsters maybe being that final blow. Because if you think about it too, the devastation created by all the kaiju at the time in King of the Monsters was far worse than it was when Kong was fighting Godzilla.
Yeah.
So
Well, they could have, like you see, they could have done. Oh, I personally think what they should have done is they should have done 2 other solo films. I think they should have done a sequel to Kong Skull Island, see, Return to Skull Island based 15 years later, or years later, done a direct sequel to Godzilla 2014, which basically Monarch Legacy of Monsters is. If you did something like with Monarch Legacy of Monsters is a 2-hour film, like say Godzilla versus the Iron Dragon for 2 hours, that would have been a super sequel. And then the fourth film could have been Godzilla versus Kong, and then the 5th one could have been King of the Monsters, but featuring Kong as well, and went all out and featured Toho classic monsters, as well as obviously maybe the new creatures are introduced. But there's rumour, you know, hear rumours all the time, and there was a rumour going around the other day that it's already been settled that after Godzilla X Kong the New Empire, they're going to do 2 more MonsterVerse films back to back, similar to what they did with King of the Monsters in Godzilla vs. Kong, because both them films are basically greenlit at the same time. So soon as production, like principal photography on King of the Monsters ended, they basically started on Godzilla vs. Kong, and the only problem with that is they were terrified what would have happened with Godzilla vs. Kong because of how big King of the Monsters had flopped. But luckily, even though the rest of the world fucking hated the pandemic, it did wonders for Godzilla vs. Kong.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember because we went to the theater to see Godzilla vs. Kong, and then immediately when I got home, HBO Max had it, and I was like, oh, good, I'll watch it again. You know, that was a fun thing. Yeah, well, I didn't know about the 2 other films, so that's good news. I mean, I kind of hoping deep down that it's a solo Rodan and solo Mothra film, but
well,
I know that would make
it's a rumour for now.
happy.
It's not been confirmed, but there's a lot of buzz in KDM, who is I follow on Instagram and I follow him on Twitter, and I do know a lot of what he puts out always kind of comes true. Like before the title was announced, he actually put online 6 months prior that it was going to be called The New Empire. He had like a list. He teases fans. This is what he does. He puts on things like, oh, which one of these do you think's the title of the new film? And he had 4 titles, but the one that he had like a smirky imagey smile on was The New Empire. So he's good at what he does.
Yeah, so far I'm still kind of uninspired with Empire, but we'll see how it goes. I hope it comes out good, you know, one way or the other. So we'll see how it plays out. All right, so where are we? Okay, we are getting ready to go into A tier now, and this will certainly make Mr. Jedi Vale very happy because it's Godzilla versus Megalon, and over time, obviously, this movie has become far campier than it was when I was a kid. But I think I agree with Jedi when I say I could still watch this and get so much enjoyment out of it. It's still a lot of fun. I love the idea behind Jet Jaguar, even though the Megalon's a little bit odd, you know. But I mean, it's still kind of a unique, cool look for a villain. So and he's got some cool things about him, and plus his background with Atlantis and everything else. So I do really enjoy this. I wouldn't have it quite as far up as Jedi would, but it's definitely worthy of being towards the top.
Yeah, I enjoy this. It's something I can go back to from time to time. I wouldn't say it's one of my favourites, but I am like yourself. I do enjoy the elements of Jet Jaguar, but I just wish, you know, obviously this was aimed more at a child-friendly audience, where I've seen that many fan art of what a badass, you know, bulky, more dangerous Megalon would be like. And as you know, last year they did what they called Godzilla Day in Japan, and it was the 70th anniversary, and they did a Godzilla versus Megalon animated short, which is fucking fantastic. If you've not seen it, you need to check it out.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, so I do need to check it out.
Well, I'll send you the link when we're done here,
Cool.
and honestly, you will not be disappointed. And I know some history on the kind of every year Godzilla Celebration Day, they're doing an animated short, which is a continuation from the previous one.
Yeah.
So anyway, I do like this. I do like elements of Megalon, but for me, it's the great fact that there's the team ups, Gigan and Megalon versus Godzilla and Jet Jaguar. For me, this is just a kaiju wrestling match, and what more do you need?
Right. And who could figure Godzilla doing his Liu Kang bicycle kick? All right. At number 11, we have Godzilla versus Destroyer. And I keep hearing, like, everybody, even before we got Godzilla versus Kong, they were, like, hoping that Destroyer would be the villain because he's, like, more powerful than even King Ghidorah. So I don't know. I think years ago this probably been lower on my list, but it's kind of grown on me over the years, and I do kind of like the concept behind it and everything. But whether or not he's as sexy as Ghidorah as a villain, I don't know. I don't think so. But you know, very cool. What'd you think of this film when you first saw it?
I loved it. I cried. Right at the end, but I just cried at the music. I love the music score at the end when you see the meltdown and the element of Godzilla Jr. This is what I love about. This is what I'll say. Obviously, as much as I'm a huge Showa era fan, and I love the wackiness and the craziness of the original Showa era, I did like the more serious tone story elements of the Heisei era. And I really liked how this built the story up, because I could not stand in Godzilla versus Space Godzilla that fucking little Pokemon thing that was Little Godzilla. I could not stand. But then I can forgive it when you got to Godzilla versus Destroyer, where they had the storyline where the island he was living on melts, and then a brand new Godzilla Jr. is born who looks just like his father. And then when you see him be just basically killed by King Ghidorah, it was hot. It crushed me heart. Yeah. It really did. And then you get the final. You get the final at the end where, you know, this was promoted all over Japan when it first come out as Godzilla dies. That's how they actually promoted it.
I bet that really got people to go out too.
At the time, I think I don't know if it made as much as I don't know if it's Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla in the Heisei era. I don't know if that was still the highest ranked of the Heisei era films, but I know that put that as the tagline, Godzilla dies, and the whole fucking country went apeshit. And when you seen him do the meltdown at the end, you were like totally crushed. And then, of course, the beautiful music. And then, obviously, you have the silhouette. And you clearly know it's Godzilla. Godzilla Jr. has been reborn.
Yep.
And going back to where we were talking before, when you watch these animated shorts that are getting done for Godzilla Day every year, that's actually the grown-up Godzilla Jr. from the Heisei era. So these animated shorts are a continuation of the Heisei era in animated form. So you see a brand new Gigan in the first one, like a new Gigan. So you can basically class that as the Heisei era version of Gigan and the Heisei era version of Megalon, if you will. And I just think it was great how they hinted at it, and it's been confirmed by Toho itself that basically these animated shorts are a continuation of the Heisei era.
Yeah, and you made a lot of great points there, because like that is the thing about this film that you wouldn't really expect. There's a lot of emotion and sentiment in it, because you know you do And I agree also with the Junior Godzilla is like it looks like Godzilla, like it actually makes sense, you know.
Mm,
So it's kind of weird that back in the I don't know, maybe they were just trying to make Manila look a little bit more human to kind of coexist with kids because that was sort of the thing that Manila would befriend kids was sort of that
yeah,
thing. But I thought it made a lot more sense in this film where it looks like Godzilla just smaller. And of course, yeah, he was getting his ass kicked a little bit there, dies, and then of course, when Daddy like erupts, all his energy goes into
yeah.
reborning.
Well, it's the element as well is that the you know, the character that's the psychic in the whole of the Heist era, she basically gets forced to lure um, Godzilla Jr. to face Destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
There's a scene in the helicopter where he's swimming away, and she gets made basically to force him to go against Destroyer. So basically, she must feel a lot of guilt at the time because she basically led him to his death, which
Yeah,
was one of the elements of the film that always I took away with this.
I agree. Yeah, it's a good observation. Number 10, we're getting into the top 10 here. So this is generally a lot higher for a lot of people. I have a lot of respect and admiration for this film. But again, there's a method to my madness when I rank my stuff. Uh, so at number 10, I have the original Godzilla 54. And without that film, we wouldn't have anything else. And so I don't think anybody is gonna have it lower than I do on their list. Like maybe some might, but I just really, there's no way you can go below 10 with this film. It's just
Mm,
it has too much meaning and the
mm,
nostalgia of it all. And of course, -1 was sort of a reimagining of that film.
mm.
So yeah, I know you're a big fan of this film as well.
Yeah, that was my number one, I believe, and when we did our ranking. But mine's number one because of why it's number one for me is because, of course, it's the one that started it all. But that's not all. I've explained this. I did a one-to-one on DJ Nubis, not DJ Nubis, your DJ Nubis, Sci-Fi Centuries channel when he did his one-to-one segments, and he chose to do Godzilla 1954 with me. And I explained the story of when I seen it for the first time on a rainy cold night in the living room with all the lights off, just the fireplace on, cuddling into me mum, and I heard the roar for the very first time, and I was absolutely, mesmerised. And so for me, it was one of the most cinematic experiences that really stuck with me as a child, and that was in my own home. And then, of course, I seen it a few years later when it was released on DVD, and they did a small limited release in theatres, and it was the first time I got to see a Toho film in theatres in here in the UK. So it's always had significance to me because of what the message is, of course, in the film, but it's a massive part of my childhood. And it's, for me, I would rank this as high as seeing Jurassic Park in the theatres for the first time. Seeing that for the first time in the theatre broke the mold and broke new ground. Well, the feelings I had then for that is what I had even younger for Godzilla 1954.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really great film. And again, like no matter if I know some people have a debate about the Raymond Burr version versus the original. I don't care. I think they're both very good. Burr kind of brings like a different perspective in it, but obviously some people are very traditional when it comes to the original version of the film.
And if you go to Pluto, you've got both versions.
Yep,
If you
kitty
go
cat tail.
yeah, that's Logan. That's Raw Logan. So yeah, anybody that has got access to Pluto, in all you've got to do, you can go to search and just type in Godzilla, because I know they have the actual channel, but if you actually go and search, It'll
You can
bring
do it
all
on
the
demand. You can
films.
watch it anytime. Yep.
Yeah, you can bring up any film you want that's available on the channel, and I know I did that. And they've got the original 1954, the Japanese version, and they've got the American re-imaged version.
Yep. Number 9. You could almost put this up there with Godzilla versus Megalon, but I do like this one more just because they took it upon themselves to make an amusement park based off Godzilla, and that is Godzilla versus Gigan. And I have a lot of fun with this. Again, we have King Ghidorah in this as well. Two villains fighting against Godzilla. Although we do see Gigan and Megalon too. And that's another one that I would like to see if, depending on what the director, is it Takakashi? Is that his name for -1?
Yes, you mean for -1?
Yeah. Yeah. I know it's
Yeah.
along those lines. And the guy is really brilliant. Like I really, really dig him.
He's a
And I,
great storyteller as well as director, and
yeah.
he's even got the eyes of Lucasfilm looking at him. So that tells you, I don't know if you
Oh my
heard, but
God, he could totally fix a lot of bad American films.
yeah, like I seen, the executives of Lucasfilm wanted to see -1, so he did a private screening at Lucasfilms for the executives.
Oh
So,
wow.
so he might not win a fucking Oscar, but guess what? He got the Lucasfilms.
Well,
and
for those that
in
don't know, I did I did a video recently about the whole like Barbie thing. There was a controversy with the director and Margot Robbie not getting Oscar nods. But if you're curious about my take about -1 and why it should have been nominated for an Oscar, go into that because I do point out some things about some past films that made the list. So,
Parasite.
yes, thank you. So I think that there was a bit of a shadiness keeping -1 out of the loop there.
Well, the only other thing I'll say about the whole Oscar debate is this: if it's not going to be nominated for Best Picture, it should at least be nominated for Best Foreign Film.
Yeah.
And when I'll be honest, I didn't expect it to get Best Picture nomination because I just know how the Oscars works. But I was a bit disappointed that it only got one nomination for Best VFX because I still think it should have been Best Score. It should have been Foreign Film. It should at least got 3 nominations, and they're the 3 I would have liked because even the soundtrack.
Got it for like Best Writer. Like that story is solid. It's a solid story.
Best Screenplay. There's
definitely
so many, but the Best VFX nomination still a win-win. But for me, he'll be the ultimate winner, this director, if he got the opportunity to direct a Star Wars film and it's on the level of, I would say, Rogue One, because Rogue One, I still think, outside of Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back's the best Star Wars film we've had to date. So if you can bring with a film like that, which no doubt he would, we're winning, and it shows you, Godzilla's won because they've seen something in him that we've seen in him all along.
You're right. Yep, I agree. Let's see. We are at number 8, and this is one of 2 Godzilla films I actually own on VHS, and for a long time. These are like original releases on VHS. And this is one that I thought they might go with in 2021, or even with Empire, which I would have kind of loved. But Godzilla versus Biollante, I still think this needs to be redone. The original is fantastic. It's a unique story. Like I remember when I initially saw this, I kind of said to myself, Biollante was kind of like this boring creature, but over time I've come to appreciate her a lot more than I had, and even the story is much stronger than initially I thought. But I was much younger and didn't really look at it from the way I look at these films now when we talk about like the mature story writing and stuff like that. So this is actually quite a strong story in the Godzilla universe, and a unique creature that evolves. It's not crazy like Shin is, but it does different things. And I don't know, what was
Yeah.
your take when you saw this film?
Well, I didn't get to see Godzilla versus Biollante till much later on. I think it had been around for a few years before I finally got to see it. I actually think I got to see the film that came after it, which was Godzilla against versus King Ghidorah, I think.
Hmm.
And obviously, I think Biolante's mentioned in it, but I never got to see it. I always remember seeing the poster with Godzilla in this giant set of jaws, which was the poster. When I
Yeah,
finally got to see it, um, I wasn't keen on the design originally, especially the
right.
rules form, because I didn't really understand it.
Yeah,
But
that's how
then
it was.
when I actually got into the film and I got to know the element of the story better, it really grew on us, similar to yourself. And even at the end, when you see her disintegrate and you see like all the spores going up into the sky, I really appreciate and got it. And so for me, it's not totally the design of Biollante, but more or less the story of this film that stands out. But I do, like you, the design of the not the rose form but the second form
Right.
has really grown on us, and I could just, like you've mentioned, I thought if there's any big bad that would fit in, especially into the monsterverse, would be Biollante, because there's been lots of rumours of other kaiju in this new film, and I was hoping one of the rumours would be Biollante, but apparently that's all been squashed. But um, either way, I still think she could pop up in a future film.
Yeah, be great. Like, I don't care. I mean, even though they've been greenlit for two more films, I mean, I'd be okay with them doing 10 more films. I don't care. Just keep bringing the kaiju.
I wouldn't mind seeing a film where if Biollante is brought into it, and she is still deep down in the hollow earth, and they did bring in Destroyer, it would be interesting to see Biollante against Destroyer.
Oh yeah,
Because
that'd be
it'll be
pretty
like,
unique.
it would be probably like the element of the earth taking on the devil, which I think's an interesting concept.
Yeah, yeah, it is something interesting. And then even then, like, yeah, that'd be pretty interesting. I think I'd be down with that. Let's see. Okay, so now we're moving up into the S tier. This is the cream of the crop for me. And this one was initially higher, but after the last 3 or 4 years, things have changed a little bit. So at number 7, we go back to one of Lambert's favorite films, 2014, G 2014. And I remember when Neko and I saw this in the theater, we talk about it all the time. Like when we first saw the tail light up in the film, like we just grabbed hands and got excited like little kids. And we saw this I think we saw it both times at the drive-in, so it was even more fun just kind of go back and see this at the drive-in. But story was solid. I love the beginning of the credits and showing like the atomic bomb blast and how
Mm-hmm.
it, and of course that all plays into part of Monarch series too, which we'll get into when we talk about it with you. But I love the whole concept behind it. I thought it was great, and it was a great opening. I never imagined though initially when this got released that it was going to be a trilogy of films. Like I got excited when I heard it was, but initially I thought it was
Yeah,
like a one-off because that's usually how America works. We just do like one-offs and then
yeah.
go.
Well, I think what happened is originally it was meant to be a Godzilla trilogy, and then uh, Universal, after the success of Godzilla 2014, decided, fuck you, we're going to make a Kong film just as good as you. But then things changed, and then it became a part of Legendary and Warner Brothers, and so the Monsterverse was born. But I thought Godzilla 2014 was a very strong start to a good trilogy. A bit similar, not on the level of -1, but for me, it was a strong start to what potentially could have been a great solo trilogy. And I think for fans, they just look at the MonsterVerse is the modern version of the Showa era with element of the Heisei era in. It basically combining all the goodness of all of what we know from the Toho Godzilla films and trying to mix it in with modern day special effects and modern themes within, you know, the MonsterVerse. And like yourself, the great thing I loved about this, the first teaser trailer, that Halo jump trailer, you didn't even see Godzilla till the very end, and you just seen like an outline, and it truly, I had goosebumps. It was the music, it was the music, it was the voiceover, and then you actually got to see the outline, you were like, fucking hell, Godzilla. This isn't the 1998 Godzilla, this is the real Godzilla. But I think, just like you, everyone that went to see that film, who knew of Godzilla, had researched Godzilla, even if you weren't a Godzilla fan, the first thing that all would have went is, I wonder if he's got his atomic breath. Is he ever going to have his atomic breath? And like you, I sat in the theatre with my brother watching this. And
I remember I asked a friend who had seen it before I did, and, you know, I was being impatient, and I was like, dude, like, does he have atomic breath? Does he have atomic breath? Does he have atomic breath? And he wrote back, and he's like, just wait. He didn't say yay or nay. He just said, just wait. And I was like, okay. So when that scene did happen, I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, well, my brother's not a die-hard fan of Godzilla, but he likes the MonsterVerse. He's seen a handful of the originals, but obviously as a kid, he wasn't into them like I was. And I always remember in the theatre and we're watching this, and just like me, I had to glance at him when the tail started lighting up, and even his eyes were like that. So it still had an effect on him, and anybody that is a Godzilla fan would have loved it. And I think anybody that knew of him but didn't know quite about him, like the true fans, I think all of them were pleased when that scene took place.
Right. All right, so number 6. This one was initially in my top 5, and but we talked about it a little bit earlier. And I thought that when this was done, it finally got the whole thing between Godzilla and Kong right. It's definitely how it needed to play out. It's definitely a good competition. They made both creatures showcase their specialities. You know, Kong was very limber. You can move him around better than Godzilla at times, but he still needed some help in terms of like weaponry. And as you pointed out, he needed like outside sources to kind of help benefit his fight with any creature, actually. And so the axe and everything else. So obviously 2021's Godzilla versus Kong, I fell in love with it. I mean, story wise, not that strong, but then again, we kind of expect that with Legendary. That's what makes something like, you know, for people that, I don't want to get too much in because I know we're going to do a review on it, but people were bitching about the story of Monarch, and I think, but that's what you need, because if you're going to skim out on the movies with the plot device and make them kind of shallow, then something like Monarch, where you're breaking it up into a series, makes more sense to use more stronger approach to the story writing. So despite the story being kind of weak in Godzilla and Kong, they did everything we wanted. We wanted more monster fight. We wanted more daylight. We got it.
Yeah, that's the thing. You're always going to have someone bitching or moaning about something in a film or a series they don't like. And obviously you can tell when it came to the backlash of King of the Monsters with the, like you've mentioned, the lighting. Every time there's a fight, they pulled away. They've obviously learned from that, seen it and thought, you know what, we need to give them what they want, because that's what they're craving for. And I believe we're going to get more of that with the new Empire. I really do. But like I say, we'll have to wait and see it before we decide if we like that or not. But for me, Godzilla vs. Kong was a great popcorn flick. It was everything I wanted in terms of the fight ways. Like I say, I like the more serious, grounded storylines, and it didn't quite have that, but I appreciated it for what it is. And like I say, I like how they used Kong in this, and I even liked how they made Godzilla just this beast, this unstoppable beast, who would just go through hell and high water to, destroy anything in his path.
Yep. Yeah, alpha predators. They, once they brought Kong out, which they explained it. They said that whatever it was, Skull Island was able to like sort of canvas or cover uh, the fact that Kong was there. That was his domain, and of course Godzilla was kind of ruling everywhere else. But once you brought Kong out of that element, that environment, Godzilla just knew that he was like, "What are you doing on my territory, bro? It's not cool."
It's like what I also liked how in the end fight with Godzilla versus Kong, like obviously the fight was set in 3 stages. In the very last stage where Kong finally submits, is I like the different elements, how you're seeing Godzilla act like a bear, pushing and clawing, and then you're seeing elements where he's on the floor like a crocodile running towards him on the ground. So they use the influence of real life animals to give them a more realistic feel, even in the fight scenes. And I think that's one thing that was off-putting for many fans in the Godzilla X Kong New Empire trailer, how at the final scene is them running towards wherever they're about to fight. And for me, it went from being a more realistic kaiju, monster animal kind of feel to it feeling more like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It looked more like the Hulk and Captain America going into battle. Right. And I think that's what some fans have been put off about. And people are like, well, it's like the Showa era, but it's a different time. And for me, I just found it a little off-putting. But you know what? I'm going to go in with an open mind, and hopefully I'm proven wrong.
Right. Yeah, and it's like we don't want it to fail, because we want more kaiju films and all this, but we in the back of our minds we're kind of like, well, we've seen the ape thing, we know it's been there with the last film, so we're kind of like hesitant to get excited about another ape. But if they do it right, they make it interesting, then maybe it'd be all worth it. So we're hoping that's the way it goes.
It all depends on the story that's written and how it's executed at the end of the day. So as long as it's got an interesting story, or even if the story's not that good, as long as the fighting between the kaijus and the action's good, and it's done in I don't want it to go too over the top. I want it to be in the middle ground.
Right.
Because sometimes I think if something's too over the top, general audiences will switch off. Where us kaiju fans will be like, punch him in the fucking head.
But well, I think and I think that part of it is because we saw what's happening with Marvel, in terms of just like, we don't want it to start flaming out. We don't want them to start getting lazy with the writing, and the idea is we want the creativity to be strong still, because we want more kaiju films. So hopefully it pays off. I'm hoping it does. All right, I'm getting ready to break it. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, just when you get the -1, wherever it's on your rank, I'm going to mention something when you've mentioned Marvel there that I think is very important.
Yeah. So I'm getting ready to break it in my top 5. This 5th one, it's going to confuse people, because I'm going to tell you right now, it's the best Godzilla film I've ever seen. But it's at 5, and people are like, well, what the fuck? I don't understand. You have to understand this. This is about how I enjoy them when I watch them. So different Godzilla films can give you different feelings. We talked about like Godzilla versus Destroyer, like, even though it's lower on my list, feeling wise, it gives you some, the good feels and the sad feels and all that. And then you can watch something like Godzilla versus Kong, and it's like just a good popcorn, beat 'em up fight movie. So obviously, at number 5, -1, we just talked about it a little bit. This is by far the best Godzilla film I've ever seen, from the graphics to the story. I did not go in this film thinking I would love it as much as I did. Like, I knew I'd like it, but I just said to myself by the end of it, like, this is so incredible. And this is why I hope Toho sticks with this director, because he's got a good eye for what he wants to accomplish with this type of content. And like, coming out of there being, you know, I'm not saying I was bawling, but I teared up in this film because it just strikes home a lot of different feelings, and the actors did such a well job with it. Like, even you just see like these transformative characters that start out one way and they end up being something else by the end. So their journey is very important, just like Godzilla's is. And so, even as it's at 5 and still the best overall written film that I've ever seen, there's some other films that I enjoy because of different reasons. So go ahead. I know you got a lot to say on this puppy, so go ahead.
I absolutely love -1. I thought, I think it's a mixture of originality as well as taking what 1954 did and modernising it for a new audience, a new generation. But what I was going to mention before when we were talking about Godzilla vs. Kong there is what pisses me off is when people say, you look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe and you see the superhero films and you're in superhero fatigue right now. A lot of people are like, well, the writing's getting bad for Marvel. The stories aren't as great. They're not writing the characters the way they used to. And people have bitched and moaned and said, well, you can't write a decent kaiju movie. How can you write a movie with monsters and make you feel for them or make you feel for characters? Well, I will look at anybody and go, watch -1 because that's the movie you're talking about. And yeah, I thoroughly like this, and it's still not my number 1, but I would probably rank it 1 higher than you. I would rank it at 4 for me personally. But all of the elements that make a good kaiju movie, a good Godzilla movie, are in this. Great effects, great cast, great director, great story, and the design of Godzilla for me is a hybrid of the legendary one in the Heisei era. I think it's got the face of the Heisei era one. In fact, there was lots of rumours when the design was first leaked that it was Godzilla Jr. But then people were like, well, how the fuck can it be Godzilla Jr.? Because it's set in 1945 or something.
Right.
But nothing would surprise us because they did the time travel, story in the Heisei era, so anything could have been possible. But yes, Godzilla -1, very high. But yes, story, probably one of the best stories in any Godzilla film since the original.
Yeah, and I think that's, we talked about earlier with Shin Godzilla, how even though they're not totally alike, I think they learned from Shin Godzilla, which is interesting because they came back with -1 and it was just, they didn't go too crazy with the Godzilla look. They kept it good. They got original, they got creative with it, but they didn't go crazy. And then some people felt like Shin Godzilla, as far as the story, despite still being kind of strong, was kind of boring. Like, it was just not very exciting. So they learned from that. And I think that's the one thing that I wish Legendary kind of would have fixed themselves. So, like, as many people don't like 2014 because there's not enough monster action. Well, I think the story is probably the strongest out of the trilogy so far. And so if Legendary had kind of gotten smarter and just learned, like right now, -1 is like your template. That's how you do it. That's how you get it right. Doesn't matter if you're going to add in other Godzilla or other monsters. That's how you do it. They get a nice balance of everything that's involved.
Definitely. And I actually said, when you've done a review of this on the Metal Tavern Radio over at the Entertainment Headquarters. I've got my review on there, and I said I had one negative about the film, and my one negative is because of how good they've done this film. Like I say, director, music, cast, story, the effects, how Godzilla is portrayed. they've lifted the bar so high, it's going to be hard to actually top this or do a story that is going to be on the level of this, that's going to captivate people. And I think the only way they can do that is if they allow the same director to do the sequel, or a director of his caliber and level that can come up with something just as good. But I think because of how good this film's done, I just generally believe anything that comes next from Toho is going to disappoint people, because I don't know how they can beat this bar that they've set very high for themselves. And I honestly think they're going to take them time with that, because I think if they rush a sequel, I don't think it'll have the same impact. I think they need to do what they've done with Shin, wait a couple of years and then do the sequel, direct sequel, or a separate film, another solo film. But I think a lot of people are tired of the solo films and are now wanting a continuation of something down the line. And I think if anything they want to do a continuation of, it's going to be -1.
Yeah. And if anything, like even if the same director does say Raids again and it doesn't quite match up to -1, and it'll always give you, as a kaiju fan, room to debate. We'll probably be debating Godzilla films for the rest of our lives. So
yeah,
you know.
Well, it's like what I said before. You had Batman Begins. That was a great start of a trilogy. The second one was better than the first, but then the third wasn't on the same level. But if you combine all three films, that all three are very high on people's lists and are all considered masterpieces in filmmaking. So even if the second and third that follow -1, if there is a trilogy, aren't on the level as -1, but they capture enough of the elements that made that good, I think all three will be highly regarded.
Definitely. Yeah, as long as there's like the cohesiveness of the storylines, like Nolan's trilogy is, then you're going to be okay. But I think you're right. I think what the mistake that Legendary made is they didn't stick with one director, and maybe it's because Edwards didn't want to do anymore. I don't remember how it went down, but
well, he did. I think Gareth Edwards was gonna do a second movie. I think something happened behind the scenes. I heard he signed up and he was gonna go straight on to do a second film.
Okay.
And then I don't know. I think what happened is he was basically poached to do Rogue One after Godzilla 2014, because don't forget Rogue One was being directed by a different director.
Yeah.
And he was set to do, I think, or signed on to do the sequel to Godzilla 2014. And I think what happened is, when whatever mess happened over at Lucasfilms, they poached him to do Rogue One. And I think why Gareth Edwards hadn't decided to continue with Godzilla is because of the deal with Universal to bring in Kong. I think that's where the idea of the original Legendary trilogy come from, because I think Gareth Edwards had in his mind to do a trilogy of films. But I think in the end what's ended up happening is there was disputes within him, Universal, Legendary.
Yeah,
Warner
I know
Brothers.
sometimes they kind of like creative differences and stuff, so maybe they didn't like some of the ideas he was.
Or the fact that they wanted to bring in Kong and he just wanted to do nothing but Godzilla, it made him not want to be involved.
Certainly possible. But yeah, I do think that's kind of important when you want like a cohesive trilogy or storyline for what you're trying to do.
And the perfect example of that is James Gunn and Marvel, because they fired him. The cast weren't prepared to do a third film if he wasn't involved, and it ended up just like, I would say, the Dark Knight trilogy, the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. For me, it's just each film that is, the second one's probably the weakest, but the first and the third are the strongest of that trilogy. But if you watch all three of them, I still can watch all three and enjoy each one of them for what they are, and that
Yeah,
all three of them are decent films.
definitely. All right. Well, so now we're getting to my number 4, and next two are again more of the fun version of stuff. Not saying that -1's not fun, but it's a different kind of fun. But number 4 for me is going to be Final Wars, and this is kind of like another, I guess, another version of what would be um, this thing. Let's stay put. There we go. Uh, this is almost like a destroy all monsters type of movie. Probably a more recent, updated version of one, but it's just not called that. But obviously, I had a lot of fun with this. Got to meet that cool dude back there at G Fest this year. You can't probably see because it's so small there, but um, we had a lot of fun at G Fest, and that was one of the big draws for me was meeting him. So this film, I just like it a lot. Of course, the lead villain, Exilian X, he was also in another great film called Killers, which I really like a lot. So, you got a chance to see all the monsters come back. The version of Gigan is pretty cool. Even King Ghidorah, the way that plays out, like the geyser and everything else that starts out and morphs. I kind of like the ideas behind it. It's certainly campy, which is what it's designed to be. Of course, we know about Manila, like that could just throw that away, but it had its purpose in the film. But it's always ranked up high on me for me. I just really love this film. So, what about you? How do you feel about this film?
I enjoy it, but I like Destroy All Monsters better. I love the reimagining of Gigan. I thought it was a weird choice to have him be the rival to Mothra. Their stories interlinked. Like you, Manila can just fucking go to hell in this. Just what a waste of time.
Right.
And I love the Godzilla design. In fact, I've got the deform minifigure that actually comes with the Manila figure. Absolutely loved the design. I loved like how they brought elements of other films into it, like the huge ship, the I forgot the name of it, the Oregon. They know the long
Aragon,
ship with the drill. Yeah, I loved how they brought that back into it, but I prefer Destroy All Monsters. I think that's got a better story overall, and I like the elements of the Keylock aliens were better than these were in Destroy All Monsters. They had the Keylocks, which are the all-female aliens, where what they did with Final Wars, they kind of did a reimagining of the villain aliens from Invasion of the Astro Monsters.
Right.
So I prefer the original villains from Destroy All Monsters, but overall it's a good film. I do enjoy it, and like you say, the Toho brought back Zilla, the American Godzilla, and it was absolutely, I think everyone was astounded in the theatre when he just popped out of the ship, but he died within a second. But
right,
least he appeared in more than one film.
Yeah, it's true. So before I get to the next one, real quick, hold on. I just had to have that pause there for a minute. I was gonna bring out the big guns, but it's a bit crowded up there. So, do we know what my number 3 is?
Godzilla 2000.
You got it. Yeah, still up way high on my list. It's kind of interesting. I thought about this when we were talking about Godzilla versus Biollante, and so we know how Orga, when it's bringing up the cable lines to try to grab Godzilla. Well, that's sort of like what Biollante was doing as a flower by using roots to try to grab Godzilla at the time. So it was almost like a learning or borrowing, and that's what a lot of Godzilla films do. Minus One had some like callbacks to certain parts of Godzilla
Mm-hmm.
films. So uh, yeah, so obviously I picked up this and a much larger version of G2000 at G Fest, and I had a lot of fun with these. I love these
Mm-hmm.
figurines so much. This is definitely my favorite look
Mm.
Godzilla. Although I will say this, Minus One is like right behind it. I think that's a very cool look for Godzilla, and I love the, as we talked about, the scales popping up, and the atomic blast was very cool and very destructive. We still don't know how
Yeah.
that chick survived it in
Mm.
Minus One, but
Yeah. Well, did she survive though? Because if anyone's seen it, you've seen at the end of the film she's getting hugged, and you see the veins going all black. That for me is radiation poison, so that tells me she's not going to last much longer. She might as well have fucking died, if you ask
right.
me.
Or
Because I
that's
don't.
maybe some sort of call to what might
Godzilla.
happen in the future. So maybe
Yeah.
she transforms, or I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Could
But
be something interesting.
oh, totally true. But as for Godzilla 2000, I love that film. I actually like it better than Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, so I would rank that high. And a lot of people had took issues with Ogre, the villain alien monster. I thought it was a pretty cool design. It was nice to see Godzilla have a new face, a new enemy, then because this was the first Godzilla film since Godzilla um, versus Destroyer, which obviously ended the Heisei era. This is the first in the Millennium era.
Yeah.
And it was nice for him to take on a brand new foe that we hadn't seen before. So it felt fresh. The design's awesome. I love I don't even mind the purple spines on the back. And because you bought them, I thought, I didn't have a Godzilla 2000 figure. So I actually had to go onto eBay and I purchased my very own SH Monster Arts Godzilla 2000, which I do have somewhere, which will go on a shelf somewhere someday.
Yeah, Mr. Lemmer has a lot of cool shit, like that Godzilla bus behind him, which is fucking
Well,
amazing.
I believe the bus behind will be a part of your number one.
Yes, yes, it will be. Number two, though, is a film, probably the first Godzilla film I saw when I was a kid, and it always stuck with me. It also, early on, was very traumatic. Actually, probably wasn't the first Godzilla because I already knew that Godzilla and Anguirus had like a kinship, so I might have seen the Godzilla versus Gigan first, maybe. Um, but this film, like watching it early on, is the original Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla '74, and that scene where we think Godzilla is like ripping open Anguirus's jaw,
And there's
Kong
blood
style.
and
Right. I was like, no, what the fuck? Wasn't really saying that as a kid, but in my mind, I'm like, holy shit.
see
And then,
the
of course, you
feeling.
realize,
Yeah, the feelings you thought when you seen that was probably the feelings I had when I seen what happened to Godzilla Jr. in Godzilla versus Destroyer. He's getting killed by Destroyer. You see who was his enemy, but then became basically his sidekick. He's now ripping apart and right in front of your eyes, and I can just imagine as a kid how terrifying that would have been.
right. Yeah, it just, obviously we realize that Godzilla or Mechagodzilla is in some sort of Godzilla suit, so they're making it look like it's Godzilla tearing up the joint. And then, of course, the battle, and then King Caesar, who we haven't really seen since Final Wars, makes an appearance in this film. Uh, it's an interesting film. I think Neko and I kind of agree that the song that's, Awakening Caesar probably is a little bit too long, but, that's just how it was back in the day when they were using that kind of stuff.
See,
Um,
that's the only part of the film that I think didn't spoil it, but I can just fast forward through the song just to
right.
get to when the eyes glow and he jumps out of the cave.
Yeah. But it's a very fun film again where you're dealing with some aliens controlling Mechagodzilla, and It's always kind of funny with some of these films because they either made the aliens apes or they made them like cockroaches. So depending on who it was, I always thought that was kind of funny. All right, now we're down to number one, and it's always going to be a controversial pick. Although I do think that over the last couple of years, people have come to at least respect the movie more than they initially had. I know Neko had a lot of problems, the same problems that Lady Fat Blood and probably even Samurai had with too much character switching around from the battles and everything else, which I can kind of understand because you do want to see the monsters fight more. And of course, that's 2019's King of the Monsters. There's a lot of reasons why this film is number one for me, and it's not better written than -1. Obviously, we've talked about this. But the thing is, when you're a kid and you're growing up with all these creatures, we know how we've seen throughout our time the last 20 or 30 years how you have bad CGI versus great CGI versus tolerant CGI. And so when I was able to see King Ghidorah, Rodan, and Mothra become more fluid in movement, like it's one thing you can appreciate the suitmation that's out there and the wiring and everything they have to go through to make those films. It's a whole different animal when you can see these creatures almost look like they can really exist.
More animalistic.
Yeah, and that's really the thing because you look at Ghidorah and the Hydra and how each head kind of thought for itself, which spawned the Kevin meme. No pun intended for my man here, Lambert.
I knew I would make it someday.
Right? I knew I'd be a kaiju. Just one head of it. But Rodan had some of the bird-like things, and Mothra, of course, the insects. So I really like that they did that. And that's something that I can appreciate from that point of view. And I still really enjoy the film. I mean, I don't watch it as much right now because I probably burnt myself out on it a little bit, but
See, I agree. I love this film. I love. For me, I've always said this is a film for the fans, true kaiju fans, true fans of the Showa era who remember, like I said, the original trilogy of films. Mothra. You've got Mothra before it, you've got Rodan, the solo films, then you have them 3 other films that are interlinked. Godzilla vs. Mothra, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Dragon, and then the Invasion of the Astro Monsters. This is all of that combined together in modern times with modern technology. It's beautifully well done. Now, we could sit back and do, well, what if this happened? What if that happened? What if every scene was like when Rodan bursts out of the volcano? Imagine that. But at the end of the day, we have to love it for what it is. I do still believe Michael Dougherty did a great job, especially with making the original kaiju look great. They look familiar. You recognise them straight away. The story for me is the most disappointing element. So I don't think about the story, I just like watching the fight scenes, a bit like Godzilla vs. Kong, but I'm more, you get to see them clearly there, but I still appreciate the fight. For me, the best elements are when Rodan comes out of the mountain and the first interaction with Ghidorah versus Godzilla in Antarctica. Them two scenes for me are the highlights, and then my third favourite scene's right at the end when Godzilla's declared basically king of the monsters, and he's standing on the debris and all the monsters are bowing.
Yeah, and then again we talked about like how these films kind of call back to other films. We have nuclear meltdown Godzilla going back to destroy us, so we got again similar themes that are running through here. Yeah, it's a good movie. Story, the plot isn't so bad. It's just the execution of it all. Like
I'll be honest, the only element in the story I do not like is featuring Millie Bobby Brown. I don't think she was necessary to the story. I've said this a billion times, is that I think the story would have worked better and it would have been darker, but I think I'd appreciate it more if at the beginning of the movie you see San Francisco, the destruction of that, two parents looking for a child in the, in the aftermath. And then it cuts to the scene with Madison and her mother near the Temple of Mothra. I think the story would have worked better is if it didn't feature her and it was two grieving parents with two different ways of dealing with grief. She does it out of anger, so what her element is she decides to release a bigger, badder monster to destroy the monster that killed her son, or who she blames for the death of her son, where the father believes it was all an accident, it couldn't be helped, and Godzilla is actually a force of good, and we need to keep him around just for these threats alone, all the kaiju that are emerging. He sees that side of it and she sees the other side of it. And I think that would have been a great story and twist, but a lot of people might have thought, well, that's too dark because you've killed the child at the beginning of the movie, but you don't actually see the son die, you just know he's missing. So, because if you think of Millie Bobby Brown's character, what did she actually do in the film apart from being an annoying little twat?
Well, yeah, true.
Nothing. She did nothing for the story.
Godzilla and Kong, too. I wonder, part of me wonders if that's just like another throwback to some of the films that featured kids, to try to connect with that part of it. But, it's hard to say what their thinking was there.
Well, I just think it's like what Hollywood always do. They see the latest trend, the latest name that's bouncing about the internet, and they say, oh, guess what, we need to attach that name to a property to get butts on seats. She's big in Stranger Things. It still is big, but I think it was probably second season when this came out, or had come out, and she was bigger than she's ever. I don't think she's as big as she was now, but I think at the time,
no,
I think
she's done some like Enola Holmes type stuff.
And she's doing Damsel on Netflix, which is like a fantasy film.
To that. Yeah.
But for me, it reminds me of Kirsten Dunst. Kirsten Dunst did a lot in her 20s. Well, she was in Interview with a Vampire, she did that. Then she went on to Spider-Man, and now she's hit and miss what she does now. And I feel until probably the next season of Stranger Things, or how well Damsel does, I don't think she's on the level as she was when she first came out. But that's just my take on her in her involvement in King of the Monsters.
Yeah, and that's, again, we're going to go back to -1, where that story's just stronger. Like, they took time to write a good story and then still incorporate the Godzilla mythology in there. So it's like, okay. Yeah, Legendary, they got some work to do when it comes to actually having good writing. I mean, they're doing great with Monarch, like I said, but some people, it's hit or miss with people. Some people didn't really like Monarch. So.
But you say Legendary aren't the ones behind Monarch, it's Apple Plus.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I always found puzzling in the beginning, because I would have thought since Warner Brothers and Legendary are working together, I thought any Godzilla content would have ended up on HBO. But it's ended up, but there was a bidding war and Apple won the bidding war, and I'm quite happy it did go to Apple, because a lot of people moan and bitch that Apple doesn't have a lot of good content. But I've started watching that Foundation, which is a good show. There's that new, it's a new show which is based on the Pilots in the War, which is made by them that did the Pacific and Band of Brothers. I haven't started watching it yet, but it stars him who played Elvis. He's the main star in that. Forgot its name. It's, my mind's went blank, but that's an interesting show. So I just think a lot of people are sleeping on Apple. I think there is some shit on Apple, but there's some shit on Netflix. There's some shit on HBO. Then there's some shit on Amazon Prime, but it does have a lot of shows I think people are sleeping on.
Yep.
And I think because it didn't go direct from Legendary and Warner Brothers, I think that's what's been the success story. It's been given different writers from a different background that may not have worked on the actual films, that's seen something in the Godzilla property that's been missing, and they've tried to make it work, and for my opinion it did.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Mr. Lambert, thank you for joining me. It's a real pleasure to have you. I always appreciate your input and your insight as a kaiju fan. And that's my list, folks. That's where I'm at right now with my rankings. But it can always change. I mean, I know it's changed a little bit at the bottom, but yeah. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
So thanks again, sir. And we've already talked about what we got coming up on your channel as well as mine. So be looking for more content, people, and be sure to check out the Entertainment Headquarters, please. Go give that man some love.
And keep watching the Metal Tavern Radio. Like I say, we've got the Cinematic Synergy coming up on the 14th. I've got these guys coming on the channel on the 21st for the first retro classic movie show. Me and DJ Anubis and DJ Neko will be here on the 23rd on my channel to do the Monarch Legacy of Monsters review. Don't miss out on that. I love this man to bits. He's a good friend. He's a great content creator, a great mentor. Keep loving your heavy metal music and keep supporting DJ Anubis and the Metal Tavern Radio.
You heard it from the pro here, man. All right, Kevin, stay put. For the rest of you, please hit the like button if you enjoyed the content. Hit the subscribe button if you like the channel. If you got comments about your own ranking system, let me know. I am going to post a link to my tier list so that anybody that wants to go and rank them themselves, they can do that. You can download the image and give me your input on what you feel like the movies are in your order. So thank you all for tuning in today, and we will see you next time here on the Metal Time Radio Podcast.